Main Gear is your one-stop shop for pre-built computers with a wide range of pre-builds available at great prices. Check my link in the description to get started on your PC journey today. The Queenbreaker has been the talk of the town, with Episode 3 Heresy receiving a substantial adjustment to how it works, on top of a 10% linear fusion rifle damage buff in PvE. Queenbreaker can now swap between its two sights by holding the reload button, and now has a bigger difference between the two modes. The single-fire marksman mode features a chain lightning effect which blinds any targets hit, while the combat sights mode features a 3-round burst which decreases charge time on sustained damage. On top of that, Queenbreaker got a catalyst which is dropping from core playlist activities that gives it rewind rounds. Queenbreaker, historically, kind of irrelevant, right? The last time it was relevant in most people's heads was thanks to Gambit, used as a brutal invasion weapon, hitting headshots without much issue several years ago. But in PvE, it's been a while. It's been a long while. You might have noticed that a lot of teams were using it during the contest mode of Sunder Doctrine and wondered, since when? Since when is this thing good? Well, it's right now. Right now is when it's good. Also in thanks to particle reconstruction in the artifact. But within the new dungeon drops Finality's Auger, a solar linear fusion in the power slot that can summon a turret to fire shots while you also shoot. You can also target an enemy or an area with a laser that will make the turret shoot even faster and deal even more damage, which sounds pretty cool because it is. But how good is it compared to Queenbreaker? Let's find out. While you are going to see some footage of me fighting the Auger boss in Grasp of Avarice, I will be using damage numbers from the Lost Sector boss on Nessus, and the only reason is because I started my data collection there, and I didn't want to recalculate everything over again. But it's fine, because all this would have turned out the same way if I tested it on the Auger, so it's fine. Okay, so Queenbreaker, with Rewind, can fire 12 shots without needing a reload, assuming you hit all of your shots, which is great. And it is capable of doing this in just under 13 seconds, 12.66 seconds. A reload with a rally barricade takes another 1.5 seconds, followed by another 12 shots, so 12.66 seconds. You're going to have 3 shots remaining, assuming you don't use any reserve mods. For the purposes of this test, I just stuck with the 24 shots, so 1 reload's worth of shooting, and you'll see why those remaining 3 won't really matter very soon. All of this takes about 27 seconds, assuming perfect shooting and perfect reloading. Now, Queenbreaker on this Lost Sector boss deals 35,465 damage per crit shot of a burst, and you get 3 shots per burst, so that's a potential 106,395 damage per shot. Let's say you're perfect, you hit all crits on all 24 shots that you take. When we include the 1 reload that you need to do, bringing our total time commitment to 27 seconds, you are doing 94,573 DPS, which sounds like a high number, but without anything else to reference to, it is completely meaningless right now. Also, while this number is a simulated perfect situation, it is totally within the realm of reason to make this happen, specifically with a divinity cage to shoot at. Without one, it might be a bit tougher to make that happen. Now, let's look at the new Dungeon Fusion Finality's Auger. We discussed it briefly, but here's how it actually works. Hold special reload to convert between turret deployment and regular firing of the weapon. Launching a turret costs 3 ammo, and the turret lasts for about 25 seconds, but the total amount of normal shots this thing will perform is 11. When you have an active turret, turret mode changes to a laser targeting mode, which you can hit an enemy with, or a specific area on the ground with, and the turret will start dealing way more damage for a set duration. It deals it in the form of burst shots, which comprise 6 individual hits. In my experience, this was about 8.5 bursts. I think the example that I use in the video is like 8 1/3. In my testing, I only used 1 laser targeting because I didn't think it was worth it to switch to re-laser a target again when the turret was only going to shoot a couple more shots. The turret would then fire 4 more basic shots before going away. So like 8 1/3 bursts and then 4 normal shots. Now, We are going to talk about this weapon a little more at the end of the video, but with Queenbreaker doing what it's doing right now, I thought a little damage comparison wouldn't be too out of the question. The regular turret attack hit for 13,431 damage, and it hits 11 times. That's 147,741 damage. But a headshot crit from this weapon deals over 56,000 damage, and it costs 3 ammo to use a turret. So in terms of total damage, you're actually dealing a little less damage compared to just firing off some shots, assuming you hit all crits. It also takes some time to get back to normal firing mode, so already I'm a little bit wary about this weapon's potential. The laser targeting mode ended up dealing much more damage. 5,070 damage per shot of a burst, so that's 30,420 damage per burst for 8.33 bursts of damage. Then you add in 4 basic shots, and combined you get 307,000 damage, so more than double the damage of the non-lasered shots, equal to about 5.4 headshots at the cost of taking about a second or so to laser the target. It's a little bit better. Then we got all of our remaining ammo. We're left with 3 shots in the magazine before a reload. Then we'll fire off 6, reload, 6, reload, 5, and then we're out, assuming no reserve mods, which we're not using. So, from the first frame of us charging this linear for a turret to the last shot of our linear hitting the target takes us about 30 seconds with a rally barricade. Each shot is dealing 56,678 damage with a headshot. 20 shots, that's about 1.1 million damage. Add in the 300,000 from the turret, and we have total 1.44 million damage in 30 seconds. That means this weapon's DPS is 48,028 from full to empty magazine. I will remind you that Queenbreaker, in this same scenario, has over 94,000 DPS. Almost double this weapon. Now, I hear you, but Datto, what about Finality's Catalyst, bait and switch? Yes, the turret mode does activate bait and switch on other weapons, so the idea is that you could potentially use 2 bait and switch weapons at the same time. This weapon does also stack up particle reconstruction and episode 3 artifact perk, but let's not pretend that Queenbreaker doesn't do that very effectively either. For the sake of comparison, let's just give this weapon a blanket 30% boost and just pretend we don't even need to trigger bait and switch. Just pretend it's doing 30% more damage from every source the whole time. Our 1.44 million number goes to 1.873 million. Our DPS is now a whopping 62,438, which still falls over 30,000 DPS short of Queenbreaker. Okay, what about just some regular legendary linear fusion then? How about old reliable Cataclysmic? I know we've got some newer ones, but Cataclysmic is probably in quite a few people's inventories already. A nice base linear. 4th times and bait and switch, classic combination. That's what we're going to be working with for this test. In using a rocket sidearm, a hand cannon, and Cataclysmic, it took me 15 seconds from the first frame of me firing the sidearm for the first bait and switch rotation to the first frame of me firing the sidearm for the second rotation. In that 15 seconds, we get off a rocket sidearm shot, a hand cannon shot, 11 bait and switch Cataclysmic shots, 1 non-bait shot, and a reload on our Cataclysmic with a rally barricade. Let's math it. Ignore non-linear damage for this, it's not really relevant. 54,967 damage is our 1 non-bait shot. Multiply that by 30%, and that is 71,457 damage per bait shot. You got that 71,000 times 11, plus the 54,000 from the one shot, that is 841,000 damage. Divide by 15 seconds, and we get a DPS value of 56,066. Again, this includes the reload that we would have to do. So technically, we could sustain this number forever, although we would need reload speed boosts the entire time to sustain it on top of, unlimited ammo. That is still higher than a non-catalyst equipped Finality's Auger. With the Catalyst, things get closer, but remember that when I calculated the DPS with bait and switch on Auger, I completely ignored the fact that we need to activate it in the first place, and we had a DPS value of 62,000 and change. In reality, between all the weapon swaps you may need to do, combined with any weird timings that you would need to hit to refresh the buff, This value is definitely lower, although I haven't calculated it exactly. It wouldn't surprise me to have a value maybe slightly ahead than a Cataclysmic. So, purely from a one weapon versus one weapon DPS standoff, Finality's Auger is a bit lacking. But maybe that's not the goal of this weapon. Maybe the goal is to use it Anarchy style, where you have this thing pumping out damage while you use something else. For that, we might need to get a little creative. So how about a straight up comparison to Anarchy first? We're going to compare one turret with a laser target, so that 307,000 damage number from a little while ago, to 2 shots of Anarchy, one on the target, one off the target, for maximum damage ticks. In this example, we get 20 ticks of 17,071 damage on the boss over 10 seconds. A lot of palindromic numbers going on. I just noticed that. 17,071, and then earlier we had 13,431, and then times that at 11, 147,741. It's all palindromes. That's neat. Anyway, there's a bit of other damage going on here. That definitely does contribute, but for the moment, I'm just going to leave it out. This damage occurs over about a 10-second duration. That's 341,420 damage over 10 seconds. DPS is 34,142. The Giga Turret did just over 300,000 damage in 25 seconds. I do not need to tell you then that Anarchy does almost 3x the DPS of Finality's turret. If we include bait and switch for 30% more damage, we're not doing that much better at just under 16,000 DPS. The main appeal of bait and switch here is that because the turret is firing for so long, not only will bait and switch be able to activate automatically on Finality, but it continuing to shoot will activate bait and switch on other weapons you could be using. So, that seems pretty good, right? To me, it just feels like a red herring, at least when it comes to boss damage specifically. I just don't really see a world where I would want to combine Finality's Auger with a special weapon over something like Anarchy with a special weapon. Yes, Anarchy requires more uptime and more refreshing, but it is overwhelmingly dominant over Finality, even including the time investment needed to swap. Now, all this being said, I think Finality's Auger is really cool, and I'm glad it exists. The turret laser targeting system combination is a really fun effect. It's an awesome power fantasy. And in general play, it can be a hybrid weapon. You want to pop some linear shots, go for it. You want to set up a turret and lock down an area with the Giga Turret, go for it. You want to beat up on a champion, go for it. I think basically everything else about this weapon is neat as hell. And not every exotic needs to be a contender for like the best weapon of all time. I realize that. Some things are just toys to play with. And this weapon is definitely more of a toy than a contender at the moment. Bait and switch in more normal gameplay scenarios makes a lot more sense versus boss damage scenarios. 30% more damage is a great boost to have in regular gameplay, and triggering it on 2 weapons could make a champion killing experience much quicker in a GM or any sort of area where you have multiple targets to hit with the turret. Combine that with some sort of auto-loading holster type weapon, and your uptime can be really high. There is a bit of a retargeting of the laser that you will need to do, which does tend to interrupt the gameplay experience though. If your target dies, it's right back to normal mode firing, and that happens pretty often, even in this legendary campaign gameplay. But this kind of content is where I would be wanting to use Finality's Auger, at least for now. So in short, use Queenbreaker for serious content, use Finality's Auger for having some fun. And then hope that Bungie gives it maybe a little bit of love in the future so that it can maybe be some kind of a contender. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.